Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman, and my pronouns are she and her. Now, this is a slightly different episode than usual. It's Transgender Awareness Week this week, and I'm having a conversation with two cisgender LGBTIQA+ people under the watchful eye, or ear, of project co-creator Katy Jon Went, who is transgender and non-binary, about how to be a better gender diverse ally. I let my guests introduce themselves properly in just a moment. We also talk about how to introduce pronouns into conversations and what to do if we get it wrong, the power of names and their importance in identity, ignorance versus privilege when it comes to wanting to be an ally, why we need more unity in the LGBTIQA+ community, how small actions can make a big difference, and that being willing to be wrong and have awkward conversations is essential. It was recorded on the 13th of November 2020. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. Let's dive straight in and let's go to introductions. Take it away, Katy.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a public speaker and educator on everything from gender, identity, sexuality, mental health, mostly passionate about human rights, diversity and inclusion. I keep either getting on TV for good things, occasionally rather than bad things. Had documentaries made about my kind of gender identity and transition. I'm a regular speaker at panels and done a TEDx and things like that. And I coordinate the Human Library in the UK because I'm passionate about creating safe spaces for conversation about topics that are diverse, difficult, or otherwise people need to know more about, hence my passion and being a co-founder of 50 Shades of Gender.
Okay then, thank you very much. Next up we have Tiga-Rose. Tiga-Rose, please tell us a bit about you.
Hello, my name is Tiga-Rose. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an intimacy coach and sex therapist trainee. And I work pretty much exclusively with LGBT+, poly and kink people. And I identify as a beige, bisexual, kinky, cis woman. And that's me, really.
Lovely. Well, welcome, Tiga-Rose. And next up we have Ophelia. Ophelia, tell us a little bit about you.
Hello, my name is Ophelia. My pronouns are she. I'm always a little S. I am cis, queer, bisexual, curious, easygoing, happy. Yeah, I'm all of it. Yeah, I don't say no to anything really. I'm a historian, conservationist. I love playing with really old things, and I love learning really new things. That's me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. So basically we have three cis people, including myself, and we have Katy Jon, who's trans and non-binary. So I was hoping that Katy could keep us on the straight and narrow, as we talk about how to be a better ally. So first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about pronouns, really. I use she and her, and like Tiga-Rose, you do as well. Ophelia, you do too. Katy, you're more of a they, them person.
Well, are they she, actually?
A they, she, yeah. So what can we do to get used to pronouns? Because pronouns are, they can be challenging for people. Katy.
Well, it's always a paradox asking me about pronouns because people ask me what are my preferred pronouns, which always brings me around to the question of what's preferred got to do with it anyway. But also, what are my pronouns? And I go, well, actually, they, she, he, in that order, which is a slight paradox because probably 90% of trans and non-binary people will be very specific, saying they, them, she, her, he, his. Please keep to it, and might get a little prickly if you get it wrong, particularly if you get it persistently wrong. But I've been involved in transgender and non-binary groups when we do a kind of a what are your pronouns round introduction. And I find it fascinating that I've got 2 or 3 friends that I'm in those groups with that when they get to their pronouns and they're asked what they are, they say, don't mind. Literally, they identify more as human first and as pronouns second, and the pronouns are kind of flexible, or their gender is flexible and fluid. For me, I love they in writing. I think they is the most accurate definition and description of me. But when people see you in public who haven't got a clue about trans and non-binary, they're just going to take a look at me and they're going to either clock, breasts and long hair and my dress sense and go, oh, that's some kind of woman probably. And or they might hear my voice. And if they're hearing my voice on audio and they haven't seen me, they're going to go, oh, that's some kind of man. So if someone's picking up on those gendered aspects and they're calling me she or he based on those tells, then I'm not going to be offended if that's not exactly how I identify. Because unless I walk around with a giant pronoun sticker on my forehead, how can I expect people to get it right? So as you said, the question is how to introduce it, into conversation. Should every cisgendered person start slapping their pronouns on all their email footers, as many kind of public sector and charitable sector and ally organizations are doing now, so that every cis person is making it normal and commonplace to put your pronouns out there. And I think that makes it more common and more typical. But I do think there's a generation that are going, oh my God, the snowflakes are at it again. Why do they want to know pronouns thing? And I understand that as well. But I think there are ways of introducing it into a conversation without saying, what are your pronouns? You can simply say, hi there, what's your name? And how do you like to be addressed? And that means, so my name is Katy Jon Went. How do you like to be addressed? I can say, I like to be addressed as Katy. Or but if I'm trans and non-binary, I can use that as a shoe-in to say, hi, my name's Katy Jon Went. How do I like to be addressed? I like to be addressed as Katy, and I go by they. But you haven't actually made the other person feel uncomfortable that you've challenged them to reveal their pronouns. You said, how do you like to be addressed?
I have a question. Yeah, is there a because you speak publicly and you help educate people how to go forward with things. You've got a different kind of viewpoint than your average person would have because you've got sort of more public exposure with how you go forward with things. Is there a polite way, a public polite way? I mean, I'm trying to say how to frame the question, like how to ask about somebody's pronouns who may not be as laid back about it or may have stronger preference on it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but are you assuming from that, Ophelia, that you already know the person is trans or non-binary, or are you just talking about anyone?
Anyone, like say you just sort of met somebody in a bar, and you're just having a conversation over a drink for the first time. Chatting with the person next to you, as it were, somebody you don't know.
But you don't, if you're chatting one-on-one with another person, actually you never use pronouns. Pronouns are only used in referring to someone in the third person, either behind their back or when they've gone. You like saying, I met a guy at a bar last night and he was.
Like what if you make friends and you go forward, or your friend meets you at the bar and now you want to introduce your new friend to your friend?
Well, here's the other thing you can use, which is the generic they, regardless. If you're unsure, you can, your other friend walks into it sounds like the beginning of a joke now, but your other friend walks into a bar and sees Ophelia talking to Katy in a bar. Esther walks in and Ophelia goes, oh, Esther, this is my friend Katy. And then you're thinking, oh my God, she, they, you can just say, they're a good friend of mine. And saying they doesn't out me as non-binary, and it doesn't narrow me to male or female in that moment. So they has been, you're a historian, Ophelia.
So when in doubt, go they. Well, they historically is common use.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They until people say and that gives the person if someone at that point actually feels like you've they'd them, they can say, "Oh, hi. Actually, I go by she." If they actually felt there was a kind of an erasure there of their she-ness, but anyone else might also just think, actually, that's normal.
Yeah. So they is quite safe, isn't it? So sorry, Ophelia, what were you saying?
No, I was just saying that. So the short answer is, when in doubt, go they. You don't know what to do.
And you said something about being a historian, from a historian.
Oh no, well, the use of they is. I mean, we only stopped using they the way it's coming back into common use now recently. Historically, it was used that way for hundreds of years. This is not new English.
No, it's in Shakespeare, it's in the Bible.
Yeah.
They is used in that generic way. I can say that my sister went to a clothes shop yesterday and they bought a dress, and I'm not degendering my sister, because you totally understand from the context that I'm talking about my sister. They went to the shops. We all understand from that it's singular still.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And how have you felt, like Ophelia or Tiger as well? How do you feel about, how aware are you of the use of pronouns? I know, Tiger, you've got your pronouns in your email signature, for example. What sort of have you learned in more recent times about pronouns, and how aware would you say you are about them?
I have it in my signature. I have it on my Zoom screen name because that's my virtual office. What I often, and I'll use it if I go to a networking event or I introduce myself, I will often use my pronouns in my introduction. And what I find it does is it makes a lot of cis people go, why are you stating the obvious? And it makes non-cis people, whatever bracket of transgender, metagender, non-binary they fall under, say, oh, there's someone who might understand something about my life. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean that we're going to be best buddies or anything like that. But what I find, I mean, especially given the work I do, it helps to signpost that I'm not just one more cis person who has no idea that there are even different people out there who have a different way of being than I do.
Yeah.
It's an immediate advert to trans and non-binary and other gender forms inclusivity and positivity. And as Tiger says, it doesn't mean you're going to get on like best buddies, but it does mean that the person is immediately inclusive and approachable and not gender critical or something like that. So yeah.
And it's also less threatening for a lot of cis people. So like I said, I've gone to networking events and stuff where I've used my pronouns, and cis people have come up to me and said, why do you do that? Or what's the point? Or can I do that too? So it can be a non-threatening way to start a conversation about being more aware as well.
I love that. One thing I find is when I use they, it's a safe option, isn't it? And it comes to me quite easily, I must admit. But what trips me up sometimes, I don't know about you, but what trips me up sometimes is biology, though. Because when someone presents, it's almost like we've got this binary, we're conditioned with this binary thing. And it's almost like the all the characteristics that add up, if it leans more towards the masculine or feminine, I think my brain almost takes a shortcut and goes to that pronoun. So if I have certain friends who are non-binary and they present in a more androgynous way. So I'm quite happy, and they use they, them pronouns. And then I'm quite happy to, I get that right more than someone who is maybe more, for example, feminine bodied or feminine presenting. Sorry to be binary, but there you go. But they use he, him pronouns. I tend to get that wrong a lot more, and I have to correct myself all the time. I don't know if that's something that you can relate to, or.
I have one client who doesn't use pronouns at all.
Brilliant.
Because I'm going to say they, because they use their name. They are intersex and they're coming off hormones and they're trying to decide who they are and what they are. And so they only use their name. And I can stumble with that because I want to assign them the gender that I knew them as, or I was introduced to them as, and how they currently present. And so I can definitely understand what you're saying. There's that sort of very quick visual thing of like when a car pulls out in front of you, you just slam your foot on the brake. Your brain just goes, oh, man, oh, woman. And it's not like a thought out thing, but you're instantly making a judgment and then making a mistake.
I mean, there are other ones that are available, including things like Z, Zem, Per, short for person, and things like that. And there's a whole kind of literature, including in science fiction, that allows for those possibilities of more than just the he, she, they. But I'll put my hand out in the air and say that just because I'm trans and non-binary doesn't mean I get it right. It's not that I'm as bad as cis people. It's just that it's as common for me as cis people to also get other trans and non-binary people's pronouns wrong. Actually, I think I almost never get a binary trans person's pronouns wrong. The binary is easy, even if it's switched, so I have no problem with that. I don't mess up there. What I mess up is when my binary trans friend then becomes a non-binary friend who may or may not be trans, and the shift from a he, she to a they, I find it as difficult as the next person, which is why I think I try and normalize it as much as possible by using it of more people than just non-binary people, so that it gets normalized in conversation.
Yeah, like just practicing gender neutral pronouns as a rule and being aware of it, right? Yeah.
And sometimes you're not always aware when someone has actually come out as trans and said, oh, I'm no longer he, I'm she. And then a year or so down the line, they actually go from she to they, and you may not be aware of it. And I've been to plenty of events where I'm not entirely in the loop with somebody's pronouns having changed again, almost.
Well, you kind of have to stay informed, right?
Do you find that people get angry easily, or are people eager to, or more relaxed to talk about it?
I do find it's like your name, it's like many other aspects of yourself. It's a very precious part of yourself. It's something that trans and non-binary people have, when they come out, they've been thinking about it for years. It is part and parcel of who we are. So when we come out and we advertise those things such as pronouns, when people don't use them, it does feel like a kick in the gut.
No, I mean with your earlier example of going into like a party and somebody has switched to they, and you're just unaware of it, and you mistakenly use a she or something, or whatever it was beforehand. Would that person? Are people likely to get irritated with you in that instance, or are people more likely to be understanding and educate?
No, that's what I was leading into, because it is very precious to the individual. Even if you think it's just an accidental slip or something else like that, to them it's way bigger. And I've made a choice to not be bothered by pronouns, but that's a personal choice, and I would say it accounts for less than 5% of non-binary people I know. I know a couple of other people who would actually be chilled whatever pronouns you use of them and aren't offended by it, but that's my choice. 95% or more of other people would be hurt by the wrong pronoun being used.
Do you think that we lose the chance to educate or create conversation if we're afraid of being so afraid of getting it wrong and hurting somebody that we never quite get it right? Do you know what I mean? Are we creating a wall that we just on both sides?
Yeah, no, and that's why I speak as a member of the trans and non-binary community, and at the same time I spend a lot of my time educating cis people about gender variance, but I'm also reaching out to trans and non-binary people to say, guys, we have to be a little bit folk, for example, which is an alternative to guys and girls, but folk, we need to be a little bit more forgiving and gentler, and to allow people to get used to these things. So I run a support group for parents and partners of trans people, and in that group they get their children, their siblings, their partners' pronouns wrong often. But it's a safe space where they're allowed to get it wrong until they get used to it, because they're used to, in the close emotional connection with another person, of when they're getting it wrong, the other person sometimes either jumping down the throat at them or giving them dagger looks with their eyes. And you're right, Ophelia, if we do that, however wronged we feel, we need to step past our hurt and realize that 9 times out of 10 the person did not do it deliberately. And yes, I do get offended if someone overtly deliberately uses a pronoun that they know is wrong of me. And as I say, although I am happy to go by they, she, he in that order, if someone goes straight to he and they do it persistently despite other signs that my gender is non-conventional, then I was thinking, okay, you are actually sticking with the he because you are transphobic, rather than just not working out what's going on here.
That's just disrespectful, right? Really?
Yeah.
It's a different sort of intent.
But I think, but as trans and non-binary people, I think we need to be more forgiving of allies trying to get it right and tripping over it a couple of times. We have to give people a try. What we've got used to in our heads for years and are living 24/7 when we come out is not what our friends have had to get used to. It took my mum years to get used to my pronouns, and my dad, to his dying day, never did at all. And I recognise, though, that my parents absolutely loved me and supported me completely, and in the end it didn't become the most critical and crucial thing for them to get my pronouns right, because I knew the intent was never malicious. And I think we've got to read the intent of the person who tried to support us, an ally, and an ally who messes up is way better than a person who doesn't support us at all.
Yeah. So if you're an ally and you want to do the right thing, what do you do or not do when you get it wrong?
Oh, good question.
I would say you say mea culpa, or you translate it into English and say, hey, sorry, I meant. and just correct yourself and move on. And actually, the very nature of correcting yourself quickly there and then means the person knows you had the right intent in mind. But yeah, I would correct yourself rather than ignore it, because then the person sees that you've noticed that you said the wrong thing.
I usually say thank you because I know that it can be an uncomfortable experience for them. They've been either upset or possibly annoyed by my mistake. So I generally, maybe it's just because I'm British, but I thank them for making that emotional effort to correct me and not take it the wrong way. And yeah, like you say, I'm sorry, thank you, and then just move on.
Maybe that's the other side of the wall too. I mean, there are people who are, who worry about causing offense, but we also need to empower people to correct as well. So hearing a thank you, I think, would empower that.
Yeah, love that. Thank you all for your contributions to and your thoughts on pronouns. I would like to move on now to names. I had a conversation with Ophelia about this, and I'd like to sort of dip into that if you don't mind.
Sure,
because we talked about the power of a name. Can you talk a little bit about what you told me, if you wouldn't mind telling that story?
Yeah, sure. Well, in a nutshell, I call him my donor. The person who created me is not the person who raised me. Right. So the person, the father person. My parents split up when I was a year old. To hear my mother tell it, I was named by him and his mother while she was still out cold after having me in hospital. So basically, I was named a name that she didn't want after a man she hates. And so I've carried a link to hatred in my first name, my whole life. And about the time I was, I think probably about 8 or 9 years old, I worked out, I've got 3 names. I just won't use that first one. So I've gone by Lynn. Mostly, I mean, there's people who have known me for 30 years and have no idea what my real first name is. So there's been a conscious kind of avoiding of that name. It's only been for the last 15 years that I thought, I don't want to suffer with a lack of names. Do you know what I mean? I'm making do out of the shit bucket I was issued. And the bucket I was issued is connected to hatred, angst, no love, there's no affection. My own connection with my donor doesn't exist. We don't get along. The whole, all the connotations that go with it are just horrible. So yeah, I renamed myself Ophelia. It's me, and it's a name that connects completely to me, and it connects to how I feel, and it's a name that I love, and I'm very precious with it. I still go by Lynn professionally with a lot of people. You'd be surprised how many people cannot spell Ophelia. So there is that. A lot of people can't say it. And also my family, most of them still call me Lynn because I think they're a little more old-fashioned. They're Southern. They don't quite get it. So, I don't push it. I live so far away, so I go with Lynn. But that's why I chose Ophelia, because nobody should have their life connected to hatred through something as precious, as we discussed just a minute ago, as your name.
See, and the reason I really love that story is obviously because I know a lot of trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming people change their name, obviously, with intent, and they choose it with intent, which makes total sense. But then when I listen to your story, from like taking gender out of the equation and talking about pronouncing a name, like saying a name, gives it power. And
absolutely.
And it matters, it really matters. So
yeah, every time I heard the name, I physically flinch. And I have done most of my life when I hear my first name spoken.
Right.
It feels like a slap. I don't like to hear it out of other people's mouths. I don't like the cadence of it. I don't like the immediate thought connections that come in with it. I don't like any of it. So why do it?
Yeah.
And that kind of feeling is exactly how obviously trans people would feel if you get their name wrong, if you dead name them, or you get their pronouns wrong. So just reflecting on that, and it's because we're given names at birth in the same way that we're given sex and gender, and the difference of taking a name for yourself and taking a gender for yourself is agency, autonomy and an authenticity that we have volition over and that we can choose to live with. I remember when I actually the first time I changed my name was from Jonathan to John when I was at university. I went to university and decided I wanted to shorten my name from Jonathan to John. And I got as much a reaction from my family for just reducing its length as I did when I came out as trans, almost.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's like, how dare you change your name to John from Jonathan? Your father's called John. We didn't want two Johns in the family. That's why we called you Jonathan. You know, and it's like, oh my God, how can you get upset? I just took away two syllables.
I do get that, though. I do see how some families would see, the name as a gift bestowed. I can sort of get the connection there. But in the case of mine, which is, it has nothing to do with gender, mine was just, there was no gift. I was given a shit box. It's like, as an infant. Yeah. So there is a bit of a difference there. But yeah, it also, I think it connects up really nicely, though, to how the visceral reaction that people can have to being misnamed or dead named or having things go wrong, because it is a visceral reaction for me. So I definitely get how it can be a visceral reaction for other people.
The irony for me is, of course, I moved my dead name to my middle name, so I became Katy Jon.
Well, that's quite unusual.
Yeah, very.
Right? Yeah.
But again, it was liberating for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tiger, do you have any thoughts on names that you'd like to add?
Out of interest, can I ask, Tiger, is Tiga-Rose your given name or a taken name?
It's my birth name. It's one of the only things my parents agreed on was my name. And I am very attached to my name and I love it. I also know how hard it can be to have a name that doesn't fit you. And it's something, I have two clients who are questioning their gender at the moment. And part of our conversation on an ongoing basis is, I'm thinking of this name. So, well, how does it make you feel? And I have a sort of not really a set of questions, but a group of questions that we go through. How does it sound when you say it? How does it sound when your partner says it? Do you like seeing it printed on a piece of paper? All these things. So I'm not saying what someone's name should be, but let's see how it fits with you and your life, and how does it feel in your body to see and hear that name.
No, I went through that process, and for a while I thought of what happened if I just feminized, John to Joni or to Joanna or something like that, and I just thought that doesn't fit, and the irony is, for the first hour of my life I was actually called Catherine anyway. And
interestingly enough, that was supposed to be my name. My mother, when she told me the story about how I got my name, she had chosen the name Catherine for me, but it wasn't meant to be. Interesting.
But it's not a name that you chose.
No, it's not a name I feel. I kind of think Ophelia chose me, if I'm honest. I can't quite remember how I met with the name. It's just sort of, I was. It just kind of like sort of giving birth to it. It just, one day I was.
Did you use it in a virtual way before you adopted it kind of in person?
Absolutely. All my email addresses, I remember back in AOL, back when we first got on the internet. In America, it was my screen. My handle was Ophelia. In IRC, it was Ophelia. I mean, yeah, my internet presence has been 100% of the time Ophelia.
Yeah, because a lot of trans people do the same. They, you try out a name to see if it fits, and often it's tried out via an alternative profile. It's tried out in a gaming community. It's tried out until you feel like it sticks and go, yeah, this is me. And I know a few people, as do you, Esther, whose name has changed a few times while they're trying to settle on something.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when it comes to my name, all I can add is, Esther Lemons is my birth name, and I never used to like my name as a kid. Especially my last name is very common in the area that I grew up in. So there's lots of people with the last name Lemons there. The first name, I just never really appreciated it, but I think I've grown into it more as I've gotten older, and I've looked into like the origins of the name and stuff. And I think I just appreciate it more now. But I do definitely appreciate that a name is such a big part of our identity. And for example, I mean, in our culture, when women get married, they take on their husband's names, which is something that always has baffled me. And I was like, well, why doesn't he take her name?
So why does anybody have to share a last name to begin with?
Exactly. Right. And I actually know I remember some years ago at work, a colleague got married, and I remember he took her name and she took his name. So they just combined names. And I thought, you know what, that's really lovely. I like that idea.
I think that happens in Spain sometimes as well, that the children take on the name of mother and father almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I got married, I hyphenated my last name with my husband's name. And the kids used the hyphenated names when they were in school. Now I've dropped that like a bad habit. Yeah.
I worked hard for my PhD. I'm keeping it, and I'm keeping my name.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I got divorced, though, my ex kept my name rather than giving it back because she'd never previously liked her surname before we got married, and for some reason decided to keep mine. And my name had become her professional name anyway, so she kept it. And I'd have been quite happy to get rid of mine because it just feels really weird having a verb for a surname.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason because I've re-chopped my last name again. But that's the main reason for myself, that I've kept the last name for me the way it is, even though it's... Okay, I'll admit it's 2 husbands ago. Let's not get special. But it's because it's the professional name. It's the one everybody that, the people who like to pay me regularly for things I do are connected to that name.
That's fair enough. So bringing it all back to allyship, I remember, Tiga-Rose, you mentioned to me one time that someone had told you that, okay, rather than say you're an ally, it's kind of not up to you, and it's kind of up to someone else to say if you're a good ally or not, or if you're an ally at all. What was that all about? Can you probably explain it better than me? Can you talk a bit about that?
Oh, gosh. So I think the part that can trip people up is there can be a lot of willingness and a lot of privilege that gets tied up together. And the problem with privilege is that it makes you blind to other people's situations and lives. And the problem with enthusiasm is it can make you run roughshod over other people's experience and lives. So there's a real risk in being an ally of being overly enthusiastic and ignorant, which is never a good combination. That said, one of the big cures for that is to be awkward and uncomfortable, which is also something that most people don't want to be. So, for example, you might meet someone with a disability, or you might meet someone whose gender presentation isn't clear to you, and you could avoid talking to them about it, or you can find a way to talk to them about it. But for a lot of people, that's going to be an awkward conversation. All that to say, being an ally can be to me, it's a position of privilege that people who you're an ally to give to you. It's not something, for example, you put your pronouns in your email signature, you might even have an LGBT t-shirt. That doesn't make you an ally. If you're not doing things on a regular basis to educate yourself, to improve and uphold the rights and situations of other people who don't necessarily have your privilege, I don't think you really get to call yourself an ally. And it's not a term I would self-apply, because I don't think it's up to me to decide if I'm actually a good ally or I'm helping people who I'm different from. It's for them to tell me if I'm doing what they need, and if there's more I can do to help them in a way that's correct for them, not in a way that feels good for me and my ego.
Wow, that's a really good point.
Is there kind of alternative, better language for you there, Tiger, such as, like, to say I'm LGBT positive or LGBT inclusive, until such time as you say, people within the community say Tiger's an ally?
I think it depends on the person. As someone who is, for example, I'm ethically non-monogamous, I'm bisexual. I would be called pansexual if I was 20 years younger, but I'm too old for that. Probably actually omnisexual, because really I'm just an ethical slut. But I think, well,
I've heard that phrase before. I love it. Yeah. I like pomosexual as well, postmodern sexual.
Yes, exactly.
Beyond all the labels.
So I think the thing is, I'm very happy for people to call me an ally, but it's not something it's not a label I would self-apply. And I think that's what we have to remember.
So it's not a self-assigned thing. I guess, because it's like, I'm just trying to get my head around everything. So it's like a multi-tiered thing as well, because we're on the LGBTQ plus scale ourselves and have to deal with our own biases. So we would judge, allies for our own sort of areas. And I guess, yeah, it does make sense. It's like virtue signaling if you declare yourself an ally. Yeah. And you're the biggest ally in your mind. I do like being positive, though. Yes, I understand that not everybody's an ally for my own sexuality, but I like to think that I'm positive and supportive with the people around me. So yeah, I can see that. Sorry, I'm talking out loud. I'm thinking out loud. That's what I do.
Well, that's what you just said as well, Ophelia. It's like, but we also make the assumption that the whole LGBTIQA+ ... is a unity. It isn't. It's got, just like we're talking 50 Shades of Gender, there's 50 shades of every letter in that kind of alphabet soup. And it's a massive assumption and presumption that they all agree that they're united and they're all allies to each other within the rainbow umbrella.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We know that there's a lot of historical biphobia from lesbians and gays.
Absolutely, that's exactly where I was going, Katie. I have had confusion from straight people, but I have had some definite non-support and phobias and all sorts passed on to me from within the community. So the community is definitely as diverse. It is not a one group party.
Yeah, and we know that there's the whole kind of LGB. It's the very fact that, a couple of years ago we had the L without the T, and then suddenly we had the L with the T, the B with the T, and the G with the T kind of tags coming out, and to literally people were having to say, I'm an LG or B with the T, and I'm an LG or B without the T. The very fact that it's like, do you take your tea with milk or sugar? It's like everyone putting out the different varieties of whether we're an ally or not now, which is, we should all be allies, and we shouldn't almost need to have to label it. The very fact that people are labeling it shows that there's an issue.
Well, that's I've had this conversation with my daughter before when we've talked about sexuality, and I remember when she was about 15, she asked me why she had to be anything at all. Now, that's always stuck. Whether or not she remembers saying it is one thing, but that's always stuck with me, and I think that's probably the end game. We'll one day, hopefully, we'll all end up in a place where the conversation won't be necessary. But right now, we kind of need labels, and we need the conversation, and we need allies, because we're not there yet.
Also, often the people who say we don't need labels are the ones who are in a position of privilege, so their identity isn't something that's either questioned by themselves or others.
My daughter, she is sexually fluid, and she was discovering herself. Yeah, she's not heterosexual herself, so she was in the process of discovery, and it seemed to be a common thing amongst her friends. I mean, I don't think she's got any straight friends, if I'm honest. But they all sort of feel the same way. They don't like labels. I think that's kind of a very young person kind of movement. Like they don't feel like they have to conform to the label they're issued or the label that society says they have to have. And I can see their point there, but I think as a society we're not there yet. I don't, because we need the labels, I think, because we're still educating, and not there. We haven't arrived.
Yeah, I mean, labels, pros and cons, good and bad, really. They're useful for communication, but they also can put people in a box. And,
I think that was her point. I think that was it. She just didn't feel like she had to be one thing or another thing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Just to bring it all together, really, in summary, how to be a better ally. And even if you call yourself one or not, I mean, I'm guilty of calling myself an ally to the gender diverse. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast. And I don't know if I'm a good ally or not. I think I am an improving ally. You what?
I was saying, yes, you are.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so now I've got my consent, my approval, so I can call myself one.
Only from me, though.
No, that's the thing, though. So I mean, if someone says like you said, Tiga-Rose, about it's not up to me to say if I'm an ally or not. If I just waving a flag and going to Pride, doesn't make an ally, and that's fair enough. Totally.
One of the things I think is really important is to be willing to to be upset and to be challenged, because I think all too often, I mean, as a cis woman, it's happened a lot in terms of misogyny. You'll challenge a guy and he'll go from liking you to disliking you because you've told him he said something sexist. And I think we have to be very careful as allies to not just be like, oh yeah, I helped my trans friend pick out a wig or put on makeup. It's like, okay, when they told me I was being transphobic or I did this thing that really upset them, I need to take that on board and really look at my own behavior. So it's like, it's being an ally when it makes you uncomfortable and makes you the baddie in the situation.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And as somebody said on something that I heard on the radio this week, it's about race, but it's just as true of gender in this respect as well, is that if you're going to be an ally, you are going to lose some of your privilege and you are going to get hurt at being corrected. And I think, and this is what I like about you, Esther, and this is what I like about this podcast, is that you continually put yourself out there to keep learning. and you know, and they're getting it wrong, and you've got it wrong. But equally, that even when you've got it wrong, it's not always getting it wrong absolutely. Sometimes it's getting it wrong relatively. And what I mean by that is you might get it wrong to one person or one group within the gender spectrum, but then the next person comes along and says, "Oh no, I'm okay with that term." Because no two trans people, gender fluid people, intersex or non-binary people will 100% agree. Some intersex people absolutely hate the term hermaphrodite, and some are trying to reclaim it. Some non-binary people hate the term NB because it's kind of infantilizing. Others love it. Many trans people would be vociferous about the use of the word tranny, yet you go to an LGBT pub and you'll hear the word tranny thrown around by transgender people. So even if you're continually learning and you think you've learnt it, you're still going to get it wrong, even if you're right in that sense, because you're still going to find somebody who gets offended by your language.
I mean, it's so personal. It's very personal. And people think, oh my God, this conversation, there's too much and I can't remember all these things. And it's like, well, you don't have to. You're just usually talking to maybe one person at a time. So just start with them and remember their details, their name, their pronouns, all that kind of stuff.
Start with them.
Right?
That's good. You already got non-binary on it. That's great.
Start
Using
with
they and them. But
how easy it is.
but yeah, start with them. But also, I think 9 times out of 10, if there's an authenticity to your behavior with another person, and you are stumbling, but nonetheless you are expressing respect, I think that will be seen, and therefore the correction will be more gentle if you are being corrected in the middle of it. And hopefully people will see your intent, that in everything else that you're saying and doing, you are attempting respect. And if in doubt, and if it's pertinent to the conversation, ask. You know, ask. I mean, there are some people who say, you know, go educate yourself. But as I say, because so much of this education and around the language is incredibly personal, the only person who can educate you is your friend, the trans, the non-binary, the intersex person who says to you, actually, I prefer this language. And what you use of me is going to be different to what you use of the person down the street who's also trans but prefers different language.
Yeah, totally. So what I'd like to do now is kind of start wrapping up and maybe just add anything else that we'd like to add, and, you know, kind of a summary of what we can do and what we will do to be a better ally. Would you like to start, Tiger?
I was going to mention one other thing, which is in terms of visual signaling, particularly if you work, I mean, I appreciate right now we're under lockdown, but I'm hoping this won't go on forever. But for example, on my jacket, I have a small pin that says "I'll go with you," which is like a bathroom pin.
Brilliant.
And it's not. I mean, I do have some pretty loud rainbow gay stuff as well, but it's a sign that anyone can come up to me and ask if they want someone to go with them to the bathroom. I've also had a cis woman come up to me and ask if I'd walk out of a bar with her because she was feeling unsafe about this guy trying to follow her. And I said, why did you choose me? And she said, well, I know what that pin means, and I thought you must be a friendly person. So sometimes it's a signal. It's not even just being an ally to LGBTQI plus. She's like, no, I just felt safe.
Something similar was used for when, after the terrorist attacks, people wouldn't sit on a bus next to a Muslim, and there was a pin going around saying, I'll ride with you. I'll sit next to you on public transport because I don't fear being blown up by you. That kind of thing, which is
There
great.
was also just exposing like safety pins there for a while too. Like if you were wearing visible safety pins, they knew that they could sit next to you and have, you know, sort of a group safety thing going on versus
very subtle.
braving things alone.
I love that. Anyone else or anything else? Ophelia?
No, I think am I wrapping up now, or am I adding thoughts?
Well, if you have anything to
I don't have anything to add. No, I've really enjoyed the podcast today. I mean, I've learned a lot actually. So this has been
Awesome.
great. So I don't have anything to add. I'm soaking it up.
Tiger, you wanted to chip in against something, and then I've got something to say.
This will be the last thing, I promise. One of the things that has come up in research and in my own practice with clients is that a lot of trans and non-binary people are also neurodivergent. And this can lead to a completely different way, for example, as a therapist that I work with these people, but also it's just useful to remember and to be aware that someone might be trans or non-binary, but they also might be autistic or have ADHD, or so it's not like these things just exist in a kind of separate bubble from the rest of who they are and how they function and how they interact with the world. And that's useful to remember in terms of just how we treat people, how to interact with people in the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because I think we make a lot of assumptions that, I mean, our experience kind of is similar to everyone else's experience, and that is so not true. Yeah.
I mean, one thing, there's a difference also between personal allyship and the kind of the whole public sector and corporate allyship. And obviously we have these things such as, you know, pink washing and everything else, or rainbow washing, the idea that whole companies that almost have absolutely zero to do with LGBT suddenly put out a rainbow flag for one day of the year or for 1 month of the year to do with Pride Month. And similarly with trans. So, for example, the next 7 days from the date of this recording is actually Transgender Awareness Week. Last month we had Intersex Awareness Day. So there are awareness days, awareness weeks, etc. And they are opportunities for allies to educate themselves, because very often during those times, people who are gender diverse will be putting out resources and will be celebrating and will be putting things out there on social media. And that's an opportunity to learn, for one. For two, though, I would say that those things aren't something you just switch on for Pride Month in June or for Trans Awareness Week in November and then switch off again. Again, a true ally is 365, 24/7. And that applies to the corporate and the individual, that you can't turn allyship on and off, otherwise it's false. So you've got to be there all of the word ally's got the word all in it, so let's make it all of the time.
Yay.
Am I allowed to say one more thing, and then I really will?
Absolutely. Go for it.
So one of the ways that I like to feel that I practice allyship is in my business. I only buy from the communities that I serve. So like I said, LGBT plus, poly, kinky people. So everything that I buy for my business, from graphic design, business mentoring, images for my course material, everything I buy from people who are in that community, and they're there, and often they're being discriminated against. And yes, this is positive discrimination, but that to me is part of being an ally, is taking the time to find people within my community, because there's more than enough skill there. It's just we don't often take the time. And so that to me is like, put your money where your mouth is, be an ally in how you spend your money as well.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
Well, as for me, all I can say is that I think it's only since very recently that I've been in a place where I'm now willing. I'm willing to get it wrong and to be wrong. And I think for a long time I probably wasn't. You know, I was scared of that. I didn't want to offend. I didn't want to do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing. But it's more important to actually say something and to stand for something. And you're not always going to be forgiven for getting it wrong, but that's no reason to not speak up. Like, for example, with the whole corporate thing, like you were saying, Katie, like if someone just waves a flag once a year, and even if they do more, but if they don't stand up for people in small situations, like a trans person is in a bathroom with you and is getting a load of grief from someone, or maybe is about to, and you can see someone having a problem with them being there, then just have a chat with them or have a conversation with them and just nip it in the bud. I mean, in a safe way, of course, because you don't want to be putting yourself at risk.
Well, no, actually, can something just tying in something that you just said and
Yeah,
what
please
Tiger
do.
said as well about the putting your money where your mouth is absolutely brilliant. And let's just flip that as well. Certainly, the corporate ones, when they're doing trans and rainbow allyship, they're gaining from the pink pound and the trans pound and everything else as well, and they're actually gaining by their allyship, so they should equally be held to account for it. And just because an organization has added MX to the options on their shopping site, that you can, when you enter your name, you can add MX, or there are a third gender option there. The number of organizations and companies that I have found have done the tokenistic easy allyship of adding an extra box for us, and then when you ring them up, you find your identity being challenged, more than anyone else. You find this, that, and the other. You find it doesn't follow through or drill down in reality. So anyone that's, even if they don't use the word ally, but they're showing some aspect of allyship, then that also, I think, gives you the right to hold them to account on that allyship.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and challenge people on it, challenge companies on it, for sure. Yeah.
And even a really small thing, well, it's small if it's not important to you, but a lot of companies now say, oh, we have a unisex bathroom. And it's like, you can have this huge building complex and there's one bathroom that some trans people might feel comfortable using, or non-binary people. And so they have to spend 17 minutes going up 5 flights and along the corridor to go to one safe bathroom. So there can often be that thing of, oh yeah, we've adapted, we've changed. It's like, you need to actually be more than just tokenistic in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are many aspects of allyship, even if it's a unisex non-binary bathroom, that benefits more than just trans and gender queer people. A lot of allyship benefits people outside of trans and gender communities, and benefits everyone. Everyone benefits from having, safer bathrooms. Everyone benefits from having better human respect.
Just having an inclusive community is going to be good for everybody.
Yeah, it's kind of like you said about the safety pin and like the person who approached you, Tiger, to walk out of this bar with you. I think it just has a knock-on effect, and I think we underestimate how big the effect can be.
But yeah, you're right there, Esther, as well. Don't be a bystander if you see someone in a bathroom, in a bar, anywhere, who's being picked upon for their gender identity or presentation. Where it is safe for you to do so. Obviously, if you can't swim and you want to dive in and save someone who's drowning, it's not going to help. But where it is safe for you to do so, back them up. And where it isn't safe, then call someone who can make it safe, like the police or whatever, report it or record it, whatever is necessary. So yeah, back people up and don't let them be the minority that gets pummeled down.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. Unless anyone has any last thoughts to add, that would be very welcome.
All good.
Okay. You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/allyship, where you can also read the transcript, and you can find out more about Katy on their website, katyjon.com, which is KATYJON, and about Tiga-Rose on her website, intimata.co.uk. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Plans start from only $1 a month. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender for more details. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded.